Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we're continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. So today, we're going to start, as we did yesterday, within the area of Avdiivka. The Russians continue assault operation upon the city. Russian troops continue to fan out both to the north and southeastern quadrants of the fortified city of Avdiivka. The Russian noose continues to tighten. Now, we are receiving reports that to the north-northwest, just to the north-northwest of the main coke plant, this locale here, there could be the massing of Ukrainian combat maneuver brigades preparing for some sort of counter-offensive operation focused on this area here. We do understand that elements of the 47th Ukrainian Mechanized Brigade, along with elements of the 1st Tank Brigade, and a host of territorial defense brigades indeed are massing in this area. Now, the problem for the Ukrainians is the Russians can see the massing of forces. And while these forces are massing, the Russians are counterattacking those forces with aerial assets. We are seeing fixed-wing, multi-role fighter bombers, Su-34s, fullbacks, the complete range of the Russian air capability focused on these units that are massing in the northwest. Now, because of the political change within the military leadership, the old military leadership is gone, and Zelensky has ushered in new military leadership. Now, this new military leadership seems to be wanting to take the advice of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and United States military advisors in terms of when and how to launch counterattacks. We know that in the summer offensive that took place last year, south of Orikhiv, the Robotna offensive, the United States desired a very focused offensive operation, meaning that the United States wanted all Ukrainian forces focused just south of Orikhiv with a drive towards Tokmak. Now, the Ukrainian military command that was in power at the time chose a multi-front operation, not just an offensive near Orikhiv, but they also chose to disperse forces to other areas as well, such as Bakhmut, and conduct offensive operations in those areas as well. Now, that operation failed. Now, if Zaluzhny would have focused all of his combat power near Orikhiv in the western Zaporizhzhia offensive, would that have made a difference? We don't know. It didn't happen. We do believe that the bulge near Orikhiv, the cauldron that was created by Ukrainian forces, probably would have been extended. Now, ultimately, would there have been a complete breakthrough of Russian lines? Difficult to say. Very difficult to say. We do know that the Ukrainians, the forces allocated to the Zaporizhzhia offensive, just in this area, never really came close in terms of consolidating gains and breaking through Russian defensive barriers. They were losing, the Ukrainians, were losing an immense amount of both materiel and armored fighting vehicles and tanks and personnel as well. They took a great number of casualties. The Russians focused a massive amount of air power and attack helicopters in this area as well, and brought up more elite fighting units such as paratroopers from the various airborne divisions of the Russian military. So while the battle would have been more grandiose and larger, the question is, would the outcome have been any different? We observed that the Russians were very much capable in moving forces along different areas, different segments of the battlefield to get divisions and combat brigades in position to repel this Ukrainian counteroffensive. So Ukrainian forces that were attacking elsewhere had the attention of Russian units. And then again, if the Ukrainians would have deployed all their forces in this area just south of Kyiv, it would be reasonable to assess that the Russians would have been able to move those combat brigades and those divisions that weren't being used elsewhere to positions near Kyiv and repel the Ukrainian assault. But it wasn't so much the fact that the Ukrainians didn't have enough combat power near Kyiv and focusing all of that combat power near Kyiv. They didn't have air power. The Russians had air power and were able to use that air power and that long-range artillery to blunt the Ukrainian offensive. So now the question is, are we going to see a focused counterattack just to the northwest of Avdiivka, designed to essentially attack this Russian salient just to the north of Avdiivka and try and push Russian forces back to the original start date of the war main line, which is this area here? Are the Ukrainians going to take every available combat brigade available and launch a counteroffensive? It seems like that is what the West wants the Ukrainians to do. And it seems like that the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, and who is trying to get funding from the West, trying to get more weapons from the West, may acquiesce and pressure the current military leadership of the Ukrainian armed forces to take that approach in this possible counteroffensive. Now, if this counteroffensive fails, it is going to eliminate the tactical reserve capabilities of the Ukrainian military. And it will place the Ukrainian military in a much more dire position as we head into the summer and late summer months, when we expect even larger Russian counteroffensive operation or offensive operations. So that's kind of where we sit. We will continue to monitor and report. We're watching very closely the events now north of Avdiivka, and we are continuing to watch Russian offensive operations in other sectors as well. Thanks for joining us. More to come, as always. Have a good day.